Paul, how are you going up there in the UK? I hear winter is kicking in, Paul.
It is definitely kicking in. It's snowing, or it's been snowing. Yeah.
Is it snowing?
Yeah, it's been snowing. It's not good. Yeah, in November. It's far too early for snow. We're about 10 degrees today, but it's been hovering around the 2-3 degrees.
Wow.
Which I just can't handle it anymore.
Oh.
We're live, everybody. So welcome to everybody from all around the world. My name is Scott Matheson. I'm the co-founder of Working In, and we're here today. I'm in Auckland, so good morning from me, but good evening and good afternoon for you folk. Welcome to this webinar on how you can move to New Zealand. And it's very much focused on the health sector. Huge demand for health workers in New Zealand now and for the foreseeable future. And now is an amazing time to move here. There's some significant opportunities. So without further ado, I'd really like to introduce you to our very international and very experienced panel. We were just having a chat then with Paul, who's in the UK. So Paul, maybe you could just introduce yourself. Paul Goddard from London.
Yeah, hi guys. I am over here in a very cold UK at the moment, but I did live in New Zealand for 18 years up until very recently. I will head back to New Zealand as soon as I can because it's much better. And but I've been helping people move for the past 15 years or so. That's when I became a licensed immigration advisor, and very much focused on helping people make the journey that I made and giving them the support that I didn't have back in 2003 when we moved, So you'll find out throughout this call, we do a lot more than just fill out visa forms. This is about taking you guys from where you are today, which is sitting on this webinar, to sitting on a beach, settled in New Zealand. And we take you through every step of the journey. And so it's a pleasure to be here. And thanks for taking the time out.
Thank you, Paul. And our other panelist, our next panelist, is Joe Bradshaw, originally from the UK. Joe, if you'd like to introduce yourself and what your speciality is, please.
Yes, thanks, Scott. Hello, everybody, and welcome. So my job is I'm the Healthcare International Recruitment Manager. And so my job basically is to secure you a role, your ideal role in New Zealand. What I'm doing is basically I'm representing you in the New Zealand market in the best possible way to give you the best chance of securing a job. Like Scott said, I'm from the UK originally. I've been in New Zealand for 20 years. So I'm a migrant myself. I know what it's like to do the journey, and love living in New Zealand. One of my big passions is ocean swimming. And so I love getting into that every weekend, and where I live in Auckland just gives me great opportunity and access to beaches and the ocean. So I love it. That's how I balance my work life.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joe. And moving on to our final panelist, Zinni Cheng, who's down here in Auckland with me. Zinni, if you could introduce yourself, that would be fantastic.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zinni. I'm a licensed immigration advisor. I lead a team of very, very dedicated, very hardworking licensed immigration advisors and support staff. Most of us are migrants. I myself, I'm from Malaysia originally. I moved here to New Zealand about 20 years ago now. And so I love it here.
And as you can see, Zinni fully has a New Zealand accent. No, she's originally from Malaysia. It's fantastic. Look, it all sounds amazing, doesn't it? Coming down to New Zealand. It was the first day of summer yesterday. I was actually out on the water having a fish with some friends. We don't do that every day, but the good thing about it is that to get my boat and put it on the water, it's a 10-minute drive from where we are right now. And it's pretty amazing lifestyle. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to be covering off today, because it's not all about work. The reason that most people move to New Zealand is they just want a little bit more balance in their life, a few more hours in their day to be with their family and to do the things that they want to do. And I think the experience and the feedback that we get from people that we've been helping over the last 20 years, and it's literally tens of thousands of people, is that is what is it you can achieve here. And so it's quite a big driving force. It's what we're going to cover off today. We'll be talking about the healthcare industry, what's happening, the local job market, what's happening there, and then how do we actually get a job, and then how does that work with the immigration system? There have been an unbelievable amount of changes to the immigration policy over the last 2 years because of COVID. I think most countries have been the same. The borders are closed at the moment. What's happening there? What does it mean for you as a healthcare worker? Who can get in, who can't, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a huge pile of work to do if you're wanting to migrate down here, especially around registration and how much time that takes, depending on whether you're a nurse or a GP, et cetera. So we've only got a certain amount of time, so we're going to crack on as much as we possibly can, and it's going to be quite compact. You can ask any questions as you go, and Paul or Zinni or Joe will try and answer as we go. But if we can't, we'll answer later. And there's also the opportunity to fill in a eligibility assessment form, which is, we'll talk about that and we'll post that up. And there's a link, and it's just a way of contacting us. And we'll go into a bit more detail about what that means. But we're all about traction here. This is about you coming here, understanding whether this is for you. And if it is, then, hey, what are the next steps? And we can take you down a pathway, which we've done, as I said, literally thousands of times before. That will eventually mean that you're here and potentially out on the water having a fish or ocean swimming or whatever it might be. So that is the goal. And we can take you there if you choose, because it's not easy. So that's the intro. I think I'll just go straight over to Joe now as our health specialist. And Joe, what's happening right now in the job market? I mean, I think COVID globally has created a lot of pressure, but what is the reality on a day-to-day basis here? What are the vacancies? Look,
I mean, it's quite insane, to be honest, Scott. In fact, I was just looking at the numbers this morning, and currently right now in New Zealand, I just got a stat that there's 3,500 jobs for nurses in New Zealand right now as we speak. And so obviously that's a huge number. And we're not just talking opportunities for nursing, we're talking opportunities in allied health, we're talking opportunities for doctors. There's certain skills within those sectors that are in particular high demand. So for example, with nursing, we're looking at ICU, is a high demand area, so all around that critical care. Mental health, huge area of need, as I'm sure you'll know in the country that you're in at the moment. It's a global thing, and New Zealand's in exactly the same situation. Midwifery is a huge area of need. General practitioners. I mean, I can just keep going on. And some of the reasons behind this are, we're looking at, growth in population. I mean, the New Zealand population has grown by about 500,000 in the last 6 years. And so we've now tipped over the 5 million mark. Now, it doesn't sound a lot to some people. For example, in the UK, I think, Paul, there's 68 million, I think there is. So, but, for let alone New Zealand, that growth in only 6 years is huge. And so that's put a lot of demands on the healthcare industry. And so, we're continuing to see some fantastic opportunities. So it's such a great time to be starting that process. And as critical health workers, yes, we know the border's closed, but it's kind of irrelevant to critical health workers. Yes, there's a few more steps in the visa process, but critical health workers could get into the country. And so now is a great time to do that, because once those borders open, there's going to be such a huge flood of people. So, there's a time now that you can get ahead of the game.
Yeah, interesting, Joe. So on those critical health workers, maybe I could just jump over to Zinni now, and maybe you can just explain from an immigration policy perspective what the critical worker policy is and how it's different to normal times.
Yeah. So like Joe said, there's always been a shortage of health workers here in New Zealand. Health workers are on the long-term skill shortage list, it's on the scarce list. New Zealand needs health workers. So in normal times, so pre-COVID times, you apply for a job, you apply for a work visa, and then you come here and then you apply for residence. But with the border restrictions in place, what the government has introduced is so border closure. Anyone that wants to come in, you go through the border exemption process. There are different categories: family-based, other critical worker, and for health worker, there is one whole category of border exemption in itself. So if you're a registered nurse, if you are a doctor, a GP, a clinical research, you can apply for border exemption. It's prioritized. You get it within a few weeks, even if you have everything in place, and then you can come into New Zealand and get on here, get the further work visa and apply for residence as well. So it is prioritized for New Zealand, and this is a time where it's never been better for health workers to apply for visas.
Yeah, I think that's true, Zinni. And we always talk about immigration doors closing and opening, and at the moment they're very much open. And also it is relatively fast for the workers to come down. One of the things about the healthcare industry in New Zealand is it's very diverse. I mean, Joe, do you want to talk about that? Because I think over 40% of healthcare workers in New Zealand are overseas trained, or I think you've got that stat somewhere. Do you want to just sort of elaborate on that?
Yeah, you're right. 42% of our healthcare workforce are overseas trained. And so there's a huge diversity in New Zealand, and that reflects the population as well. So it makes it a really interesting place to work. I guess the other thing about the industry, and I think we've got a slide up there now, is there's a really high standard of care in New Zealand. In terms of patient safety. And also when we look at, the feedback that I get from the healthcare workers that I've brought over to New Zealand, they are just so amazed. Like, I'll give you one example of an emergency department nurse that I helped over here, or we helped over here recently. She just couldn't believe that she could stop and make a cup of tea, and actually have a break. And the charge nurse manager was like, go and have your break, and she's like, but I'm not used to this. Sometimes I've worked 16 hours in the UK without having a break and taking lunch, etc. And so it really is a different culture. And yes, you'll work hard and there will be demands, but there is that opportunity to have a much easier, nicer pace of work. And then obviously combine that with the wonderful access to the other lifestyle aspects outside of the office, so to speak.
Thanks. Yeah, correct. So look, what's quite interesting, Paul, and you'll have some commentary around this, I'm sure, is that here we've got this situation where there's a massive demand for healthcare workers in New Zealand. We have globally a huge amount of interest in New Zealand, which has been elevated because of our COVID response, which has been, applauded. Even though Auckland is in lockdown now, I think there has been fewer than 50 fatalities or deaths around COVID. So New Zealand is becoming a very popular place, and these hospitals are flooded with CVs with people from all around the world who want to move there, and then of course they can't do anything about it because they're just overwhelmed. So one of the things that you talk about is sort of understanding the process and getting prepared. Do you just want to explain what we mean about that?
Absolutely. It's a very important step that most people miss, or they don't do it properly. A lot of people think that because they've read about New Zealand, or maybe they've been lucky enough to visit New Zealand, that they're ready to move to New Zealand. In their mind, they're ready. Mentally, they're prepared and they want to do it, but they're not actually ready. to be ready to make the move, you've got to be what we call information ready, which means having all the personalized information you need about you and your family and how everything's going to work, and you know, anything from cost of a loaf of bread to, you know, which rugby team should you support in New Zealand, or whatever it might be. You know, these are important questions that you need answers to if you want to live in New Zealand. You also need to be what we call document ready, which is where Zinni comes in and the team there of getting your documents ready for your visas. Ideally, you need these things in place early on, really early on in the stage, because, and Joe will back me up on this, you know, it's much better and it's really important when we're, you know, Joe's interacting with employers, if she can literally turn around to that employer and say, you know, here's Joe or here's Jill, and they're skilled, they're eligible, we've checked it all out, their documents are ready to go, everything's in place, their registration's underway, everything's done, and all you need to do is offer them the job. And if you offer them the job, we're here to make sure everything runs quickly and smoothly. That's the bit that people miss. Whatever you do, my advice, don't try and do this on your own by just randomly firing off CVs. It just doesn't work most of the time. The success rate I was reading is less than 2% of people who do it that way succeed, because what the employers really need, because they're spoiled for choice, as you just said, Scott, there's a lot of people want to move to New Zealand right now. I've not seen anything like this in the whole time I've been doing this job. It's absolutely insane, the amount of people wanting to move, because it's going to be, you know, the most vaccinated country in the world with the least COVID rate in the world, and also the best place to live in the world. And so it's making New Zealand very attractive, and employers are spoiled for choice. And the smart employers, the ones that we're working with, are going to go with the people where the risk is removed. And the risk is removed when you're using people like us to help you, because that's what happens. And firing off CVs on your own usually just does one thing, and that burns bridges that you're not going to be able to open again. Because if you don't get that job offer with them initially, it's really hard to get that traction back.
Yeah. Can I add to that, Paul? You know, that's absolutely true. And I live and breathe that all the time. You know, I talk to a candidate and, you know, they'll have sent a whole lot of CVs off and had no response, or been declined because they're overseas and the employer's not in a position to be able to manage that kind of process. And they'll come to us saying, you know, feeling really disheartened that they're never going to be able to get to New Zealand because, you know, they're overseas and they can't get a job. And, you know, so what we always recommend is, you know, don't rush in and fire off lots of applications to jobs. You know, just take a step back, think about the process, get yourself ready. And being ready really means, you know, making sure that you can move from eligibility point of view. Talk to me from a recruitment point of view, you know, having that consultancy with me so that we can actually put you forward in a planned strategic approach. You know, your CV is looking the best it can look. We put a profile together. We've understood all your motivations for moving. And we're presenting you in the best possible way. And we're also presenting you to the decision makers, not with a whole load of other candidate applicants that you just can get lost in. We'll present you to the right people, and then they'll come back to me and say, yep, we want to interview Katie. And that can happen quite quickly. And so, you know, it doesn't cost you anything to work with a recruitment consultant to represent you in New Zealand. But what it does is it really speeds up that process and gives you a much smoother and efficient kind of way to secure a job.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, you're right. I think another way of kind of looking at this is you want to be easy for the employer. You don't really want to be somebody who's, this person looks really good, but they've still got to do this, get their registration.
You're right. Yeah. And that's it.
All these fish hooks, and you don't really want those fish hooks. You want to make it smooth and easy and I guess comparable at least to a local candidate. And that's kind of the thing.
I think there, Scott, sorry, can I interject there just to say that one of the number one things is that employers want to know, well, when will she or he be in New Zealand? And you don't know that until you've done some of the steps of the process. And so if we can't say, well, we don't know because they're not registered, or we don't know whether they've got their eligibility, you know, we haven't done that screening, we need to be able to give them an indication as to when you're going to arrive so that they can do their workforce planning.
Yeah. Yeah, so that preparation is key. The first thing that we recommend is it's called a My Visa Path or an eligibility assessment. We have a free form that you can fill out now. And it really just goes through your who you are, your experience, your qualifications, and we have a look at it to basically give you a feel as to whether you can or cannot migrate. And there are things that you think, oh, well, I can easily migrate, but there might be things that will stop you from that. So that's a really important first step. Zinni's team will go through that eligibility assessment and contact you. And if it looks like you're able to migrate, then we'll be asking you to do a full eligibility assessment. Now, there is a cost for that. It's £150 UK sterling, but it's a very, very, very detailed assessment to make sure that you meet the immigration criteria. Maybe, Zinni, you can explain what this is, because it's a very important but hugely time and cost-saving part of the process.
Yeah, so basically when you fill in the form, we ask you all your details about your background, your work history, your qualifications, whether you have a partner, your kids, your health situation, everything we want to know. And then once we get that form filled, it goes to one of our licensed immigration advisors. They spend a lot of time going through all the detail you have provided, and then assessing your options of how you can come to New Zealand. So there are different types of visas that you could apply for. And when they look at your information, they determine maybe this is the best path forward, depending also on when you want to come. So they go through that, they map out the steps that you need to take to get to New Zealand. Some people, the New Zealand immigration system, there's a lot of requirements. So things like having good health. If you have a medical condition, it potentially could affect the application. Or if your child needs special education, that potentially could also affect your pathway. So part of the report, so you get this whole big report, but it's very clear in terms of what your options are and what the steps that you need to take. So part of the report is we also identify any potential barriers that you might have in your pathway, and also how you could overcome those barriers as well, if there are possible ways. So I think the first step, that's very, very important, because you want to know what your options are to be able to move forward in the right direction. Otherwise, you're just going at it blindly, and it does waste a lot of time. Especially right now, there's so much information online, there's people talking on forums. It's best to get advice that's directly to yourself and to your situation. So that's what we do with the eligibility assessment.
Yeah, social media, there's a lot of information, isn't it? You want to get direct to the source. Good point, Zinni. So the eligibility assessment seems like a very basic tool, and we know that because you're in the healthcare industry, you think, oh, well, of course I'm eligible, and you may well be. But we look at it kind of like a driver's license. If you're stopped by a traffic officer or a policeman, you have to show your driver's license. Of course, you can drive, but you've still got to demonstrate that you've got that license or any other qualification. And the eligibility assessment says, yes, I'm eligible to move to New Zealand. I meet all the criteria. I meet all the health criteria. I meet all the medical criteria. So does my partner. So do my children. There's nothing effectively from stopping me engaging with this employer around a job interview, because as soon as I get the job or offer, I can lodge my visa and get down here. So that's what all this is about. It's a big chunk of the first step of the journey. So I just want to go back to you again, Zinni, one more time, because you're talking all this stuff, but you're a licensed immigration advisor. Paul is a licensed immigration advisor. That's a very, very important part of this process. Can you just explain what that means for the people who are listening here today? Because it gives everybody a lot of safeguard, doesn't it?
Yeah, so anyone that wants to, or anyone that is providing immigration advice or assistance must be either licensed or exempt from licensing. So they're, for example, a lawyer. So this legislation was really created by the government to protect the consumers. So that makes sure you have the right advice from the right people. So every year we have to renew our license. Some of us go through an inspection process. The IAA, so the Immigration Advisor Authority, who issues our license, goes through our file and makes sure we do everything correctly according to our code of conduct. So if we have anything that doesn't meet the code of conduct, potentially that's a breach, and that could lead to either a fine or losing our license or a potential sentence. So it is a very serious issue with very strict codes. So all of us do take it very, very seriously. And the process of getting licensed as well is people go through this really intense course. It's you learn about all the different legislations, the policies. There's so many different types of visas. So you do that intense course, and then you apply for a provisional license. For 2 years, you are supervised by a full license holder. And then once you can show that you are competent, then you can obtain your full license. So it's a very stringent process.
And no matter what, we recommend that if you use us or if you use somebody else, that just 100% make sure that they're a licensed advisor and make sure that they are current. Joe, I'm going to come back to you in a second because I want to talk about registration. But Paul, first, from you, once people have done that eligibility assessment, they get an hour consultation with you, which is to go through the report, but also go through, what's unique about them and some of the issues. So what, generally speaking, I don't know how many thousands of times you've done this, but what are the sort of the roadblocks that you find that people encounter, and how do you unlock or unblock those roadblocks so that people can move?
Yeah, it's perfect, Scott. And actually, that's a really good point, because some of the people on here in the chat, you've seen me typing away, have been talking about the online assessment. So I just wanted to make it clear to people that when you fill out that first initial online assessment call with us, we will be getting all the information we need about you, and that unlocks the opportunity to start talking to us. And so there's usually an initial free sort of 10-minute call just to give you some clarity. I call it a clarity session, just to find out a bit more about you and your family and where you're at. And then, as you said, Scott, that leads into potentially a full assessment from the team and from Joe and the visa team, and a consultation, usually with me. And everyone has different roadblocks. People have all sorts of things going on in their life. And one of the key things that I see all the time is if you're trying to make this move on your own, your time is sucked away from you. It's sucked away by the internet, because all you've got is the internet, and you're trawling around, and it's hours and hours and hours with a glass of wine in your hand or whatever, and you're just going round and round in circles. And then you've got your partner and possibly the kids, if you've got family, and the dog and everything else, and life just gets in the way. And what seems like months and months goes by in a flash, and all of a sudden you turn around and it's a year or two since you first started thinking about making the move, and you've not actually done anything apart from read the internet. And I see it all the time. You need the ability to carry on with your life, but have other people like us start helping you take steps at the same time. And if you break the move down into steps, it makes it simple. So when you get a full consultation with us, not only are you talking to Joe, who's going to map out your job journey and how that works, you're going to talk to me, and I'm going to map out the rest of the journey, which is the whole moving side of the journey, the emotional side of it, the family side of it, the steps you need to take, the hurdles you need to overcome, how visas work, timeframes, budgets, costs. if anyone on this call, if I put you in a room right now and said, write down all the questions you've got about New Zealand, those lists would be huge. You need the answers to those questions. That's why we do the first step, because then you're in the perfect position to move forward, because by giving you the answers, we're removing your risks and we're maximizing your opportunities. And that's how we help people move. Yes, we do visas. Yes, we fill out forms. But what we actually do is we minimize your risks and we maximize your opportunities.
And give clarity.
And give clarity all the time. Clarity in these crazy days that we've got at the moment, where there's speculation and rumor and everything flying all over the place. You need clarity, and if it's coming from people like us, you can rest assured that it's accurate.
Thanks, Paul. So, Joe, as I said, I want to talk to you a little bit about registration, because you can't get a visa without registration, and so we talk about being prepared. Employers are going to look at you if you are registered. If you're not registered, well, then you're months, potentially 12 months away. So, who needs to get registered? What's the process? How long does it take? What do people need to do? This is the important stuff. This is the get started stuff.
It is. That's right. It is. You can't get here unless you're registered, got a job, and then got your visa. But that first step definitely is getting organised to get your registration done. So it's a little bit different in New Zealand in that there's so many different registration boards. So depending on, if you're a nurse, there's the nursing council. If you're a doctor, there's a medical council. But then if you're a physio or a social worker or an occupational therapist or a sonographer, there's different boards for each of those. Now, when we start chatting with you, and I think I'm going to have put my email address up there, but I also put up there on the chat a link for you to register your interest from a job point of view. So that's in the chat. We will guide you on the different registration boards and also can give you support on that process. But really, you need to think about that process of registration taking about 6 months. And that is really subject to how long it takes you to pull the necessary documentation together to be verified for your registration. And I know, some people have had huge challenges with that and delays in the last 18 months because of COVID, universities being closed and not being able to get your credentials from university, etc. So I can't emphasize enough to get started on that registration process. And as I was saying previously about that whole time frame for moving, if you started your registration or you've already got your registration, then you are certainly more attractive to an employer because it shows that you're motivated. It shows that you've got commitment to actually moving. And that's a really big deal for an employer. When they're hiring somebody from the other side of the world, they want to know that actually you're serious. I mean, it's all very well doing an interview and get offered a job, but are you ready to move? Are you committed to moving? So that registration piece is really important.
Yeah, it's a demonstration, isn't it? It's a demonstration that compares you, that sets you, as different to all the other applicants that haven't gone through the registration process.
That's right. And look, there's a lot of questions about this. And I think we've also posted up an FAQ. But if you don't mind me just answering a couple of questions, Scott, if we've got time.
Yeah, we've got time.
There's a question about converting your UK license to New Zealand. And, that's not possible. But generally the criteria is that you're fully qualified and you've got a couple of years post-registration experience. If you're talking about nursing and allied health, from a doctor's sort of point of view, that can be a little bit different. And there's such a thing as like comparable health system countries as well. So then you can sort of get into a little bit more complexity if you're not from an English-speaking country. You might need to, there's lots of people talking about English language tests. So you might need to do an English language test. Depending on the regulating board, they'll have specifications on what's their pass rate. So there's IELTS is one of them. I've posted this on the chat. OET is another one. And again, we can talk you through that. But if you need, you may need to do that as part of your registration, depending on your nationality.
Look, and some of you will have to do IELTS for your residency application as well. Some countries are exempt, isn't that true, Zinni?
Yeah.
But most countries in the world, and let's face it, most of you would probably want residency. And actually, shall we just segue over there and dive into that, because we've only got about 5 minutes left. But really, the ultimate goal of everybody is to live down here, get residency, get permanent residency, get citizenship, get a passport, and enjoy being a New Zealander. What is that process, Cindy? Can you take us through that? Because it's all very well getting your essential work visa. What's the next step?
Yeah. I'll just go back to the registration just really quickly. So registration is not just required for the job, it's also mandatory for the visa application. So in the instructions, there is a list of occupations where if you don't have registration, then you can't get the visa. So it's really important what Joe mentioned, get prepared, get your registration. That is the first step. In terms of getting the visa, from temporary visa, work visa, all the way to residence visa. So the residence category, a lot of people would have heard of the skilled migrant category. So that's SMC. That's a points-based system. So part of the assessment when we look at your file is we assess your points and the potential points that you could claim under SMC. And then we also look at the temporary visas that you could be eligible for. So not just for yourself, but also for your partner and also your children, based on your age, based on your children's age, etc. I also just want to talk a little bit about the unique situation that we're in right now. So being the borders closed for almost 2 years, New Zealand really wants to retain and attract the skills that's required here in the country. And skilled health worker is a big need for the country. So for anyone that is able to come through the border exemption process on what's called a critical purpose visa as a health worker, you also have an opportunity to apply for this one-off resident visa if you can get here before 31st July 2022. So that's really like a golden ticket. It's really a once in a lifetime opportunity. It's not every day, if at all, that immigration creates a new category of residents. So if anyone is thinking of moving, you have the next 6 months to get into the country for a chance to apply for this one-off 2021 resident visa. If not, that's okay. We can still look at your situation. We can still map out your pathway for you. There are some things to take into consideration, being the immigration policies are changing. So mid next year, there will be a huge immigration reform. So we also take that into account when we map out your journey for you.
Hey, amazing, Sally. I had completely forgotten about that residency 2021 being an option for people who are offshore. So the New Zealand government has basically, because of COVID, announced this one-off. It's called Residency 2021. It's for people that are here that are onshore. If they meet certain criteria, automatically gain residency. But a few people in certain categories, including health, if they arrive here by what date is it?
31st July 2022.
If you're in New Zealand by the 31st of July 2022 and there's a little bit more criteria, you can automatically obtain residency. Now, I'm not going to advise you on all that. There's a whole lot of other criteria.
You can apply for it.
Apply for it. See, that's why I'm not going to say anything. But I guess that's a point of urgency. It's never occurred ever. It's a COVID response, and it is an opportunity for everybody. So thanks for bringing that up, Cindy. I'm really conscious of time. We said we'd be 40 minutes and we're at 39 minutes. I'd really like to go on because I still feel as though we've got a little bit more to cover, but I think, Paul, if you could just sum up, especially in terms of preparation, and give your feedback, please. Wrap up.
Really simple. I think hopefully everyone's found this really useful and has gained a lot of information in just the 40 minutes that we've been talking. Just imagine what that could be like if it was personalized and just about you and your move, and you're talking to us one-to-one. That's where you get real value. And so very simple step there. We've been posting it in the chat all the way through. Click that link, do that first initial online assessment. That's not going to cost you anything. Get your details in front of us, and open these doors and start opening these doors. We're happy to help you. We can help you with every aspect of the move, from jobs to visas to relocation, everything. So what have you got to lose? Just click the link. There's some really good skilled people here watching, and so that's it. Just do that. Simple.
What have you got to lose? That's a good.
What have you got to lose?
And Zinni.
Yeah, I think the first step is always the hardest. But once you've taken the first step, then you take the next step. So do that eligibility assessment, find out your options. Our advisors will guide you through the process. We will give you a checklist. We'll submit your application on your behalf, bring you here to New Zealand, and then apply for that residence visa with this one-off opportunity.
I do agree with that. It's very elevating and motivating. It's when you fill that out and, oh, wow, I can move, and this is how I can do it. It creates this pathway, doesn't it? And it's so energizing. And, oh, I just need to do this. And then you're on the journey, and the excitement takes you along that journey. And then, then Joe steps in, and suddenly things become quite real, don't they? Can you hear me, Joe?
Oh, yes, sorry. Wait, I just thought, I didn't realise you were referring to me to chat. That's absolutely right. I guess one of the things I actually really wanted to say that we probably haven't said is that we work super closely together. We're a very collaborative, integrated team. And so, we will hand you, this we're talking about steps and taking one step at a time, but we'll guide you onto who the next step is with and introduce you to that person. So, for example, you've done your eligibility assessment, you've had your consultation with Paul so that you know that, there's no barriers from a visa point of view. And then Paul will introduce you to me so that we can then talk about the job market, where your skills fit, work through all that information in terms of your experience. And I'll talk to you, I've got heaps of relationships throughout New Zealand in private and public health, like nationwide. And so we'll talk about where you want to live, what suits you from a lifestyle point of view. And then once we've done that, once you've got your job and you've got your registration, then you're handed back to visas again. So that's what we're talking about with these steps. And then you've got your visa, and then Paul kind of comes into the mix again, because he's going to help you tie up the last bits of that kind of relocation process. So we're all involved every step of the way.
Yeah, and look, I know it looked a bit odd. I was looking behind me, and Joe was talking about all the relationships, but this is a magazine that we produced about working in New Zealand. I don't know if you can see that. It's from 2005, 2006. So I guess one thing about working in is we've been around. We're part of the furniture here in New Zealand. So Joe, in terms of talking about relationships, that's what it's about, really. So we try to be real. We try to help. We love doing what we do. We really want people to come here. We love our country. We love helping people come here. That's what we do. We're passionate about it. So we're going to finish off here. Now, when we do finish, we've got a few photos that all of us on this panel have contributed. Hang around for a minute and look at our sort of holiday snaps about what life is like in New Zealand. But otherwise, the next time we hear you will be through the eligibility free form. And then Zinni, or our team, and then hopefully with Paul and Joe, and we'll see you down here one day, hopefully really soon, hopefully before July the 31st. Yeah. Thanks very much for joining us today. I hope you found it useful. Kia ora, goodbye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.